Now, the Education Secretary, Michael Gove, wants to work with faith groups to improve religious education. He wants to have talks to revitalise, as he puts it, RE in schools. There are already legal requirements for every school to provide RE lessons and a daily act of worship. But the National Secular Society believes religious interest groups are too involved in forming policy in local non-faith schools. It is against acts of worship and believes religion should be studied only as an important political and ideological phenomenon. Well, we'll discuss the contrasting views on religion in schools in a moment, but first we went to visit a school to see RE in action. At Anfield Junior School in Liverpool, the pupils are taught about a different religion every term.
Who can tell me why Muslim people wash their hands before touching the Quran?
They wash their hands to show respect and love for their God.
The children come from different faith and cultural backgrounds, but assistant head teacher Wendy Beaumont thinks this helps rather than hinders religious education.
Our schools are really mixed schools, multicultural schools, so it really helps teaching RE through different religions because we've got children from other faiths across school, so they can bring things in from home, their parents come in from home and join in and talk to the children about how they celebrate festivals, so it just brings the curriculum to life.
I think it's important to learn about religions because if you do something wrong, it's disrespectful and it's not really very nice to be disrespectful.
My most religion that I know about is Buddhist because I'm a Buddhist because my mum's from Thailand and I've been a Buddhist since I was born.
There's a time of collective worship at the beginning of each day. Pupils are allowed to opt out, but no parents have taken this option. The children can use this time in morning assembly as they wish.
A couple of them choose not to join in with prayer at the end of assembly, but that's absolutely fine. They just have some reflective time to think about their own religion. And none of the children have opted out of RE lessons. So why do you think they keep it high up on a high shelf?
There's an hour of RE every week, and the children's work illustrates what they've learnt.
So why, guys, do you think it's important in school that we learn about other religions?
We need to see what's in other people's lives and what they believe in.
I think it's really important to teach religion across schools so everybody appreciates everybody else's faith and why they act the way they do, why they pray the way they do, to think about all of the other religions out there and to accept one another for what they are. Fantastic.
Anfield Junior School in Liverpool. So should we be investing more time and resources into improving the way we learn about religion, or is it just no longer as relevant as it once was? Is there even room for religion in the classroom? What do you think? You can join in by webcam or make your point by phone, text, email or online. And we'll hear the view of our studio guests first. George Hargreaves, fewer people are following a religion and certainly a lot fewer people regard themselves as Christians or practicing Christians. You know, is there a case to say RE just isn't as important in school as it used to be?
We are surrounded by a melting pot of different religious faiths around us. And I think this film actually was quite a good film because it made the point that we are actually preparing these children for life. That's what education is about, preparing them for life. And in this country, you're going to come up against a Muslim, you're going to come across a Sikh, you're going to come across a Hindu, you're going to come across a Christian. And if we have more understanding of each other's faith, there's going to be less conflict. To try and eradicate faith teaching, which Michael Gove has to take responsibility for actually undermining it with his policies regarding the baccalaureate. I'm glad he's now trying to reverse that, but he's actually caused the damage in the first place. It is essential that we have it at the heart of our education because our education is about living together in today's society.
James, you must have been brought up with quite a traditional Christian-based RE in school. It has not done you any harm, has it?
Well, I didn't take any notice of it, but I mean, that was just part of life. And now we have actually moved forward. We're more intelligent than perhaps we were. I think we should teach about religion in school, in a history class or whatever. I think people need to understand what religion is, but we're talking about a faith. We're not talking about a truth. And what happens in school, and because, you know, the Church of England school was the only school in the village where I lived. You had to go to that. They had a monopoly on education. You cannot allow people to try and inflict their religious beliefs into children. You can go to your synagogue, your mosque, your church, you go anywhere and you can learn about religion if that's what you want for your children. You get an overview of religion, all right, as something that some people believe in certain cases in school, and that's it.
Is it about the difference between instruction
This is it, there's a big
and
difference
actual
here.
kind of learning about
Yeah,
belief as a thing people do?
Yeah, good quality religious education is a good thing, and we would want it as part of the national curriculum as a core entitlement for all young people, just so they can learn about lots of different beliefs and
not as a fact.
worldviews.
Just let it
But yes, but
finish.
religious instruction, obviously we're completely opposed to, because that's just teaching very narrowly one religious viewpoint, and that isn't actually it doesn't promote social cohesion, it doesn't teach kids about the people that they will interact with when they actually leave the school situation. And also, 2/3 of young people are non-religious. And so you need to make sure that you're teaching
Well,
them
I think
things that
this
actually
is George's
reflect it.
really important distinction Pavan's making, because that was clearly a mixed school. In faith schools, children are being instructed, and one wonders really what they're learning about other faiths. Aren't they potentially being taught other faiths are inferior and only your way is right? I mean, isn't that what a faith school
you
does?
can't have conflicting arguments that are all true. So in a faith school, in a Muslim school, they're going to say this is the way. In a Christian school, they're going to say this is the way. That's obvious.
But should schools be doing that?
Well, if they're a faith school, they should be, because
faith schools, though.
hang on, there should be choice.
Yeah.
We believe in choice.
Are you going to go to heaven?
Sorry?
Are you going to go to heaven?
I believe I am.
Am I going to go to heaven?
I haven't inquired as to your faith in the Lord
I have
Jesus
no faith.
Christ.
Am I going to go
Well,
to
I
heaven?
don't think you are.
Well, there we are. And we
Now,
allow that
that's
sort
my
of rubbish
faith.
to be taught in school.
That's my faith.
Ridiculous.
He opened up the box. He asked a question. I did not come on the programme to tell you that you weren't going to heaven.
But
you asked me the
that's your
question, and I
belief,
have to
and we shouldn't
reflect
be
the
doing
answer
that.
with my belief. And the fact is, in
But
a
you're
faith
shouting
school,
at me. I'm just asking you gently, shouldn't you be nicer
faith
about
school,
people?
In a faith, because you're talking over me. In a faith school, people sign up for a faith school because they want their children to be brought up in their faith. Now, we were talking about RE in general across the board, and I think there was much agreement. In fact, even with
Okay,
James,
we've
no,
made
let
that
me make
point.
this point. Even with James, he went into his RE and he rejected the religion. Nobody forced him to become a Christian, but he decided.
He's 5 years old.
Haven't.
There is a problem actually there with what George is saying, because what he's actually demonstrating is what sort of thing that comes out in religious instruction. So they will be talking about ethical issues such as abortion, contraception,
Absolutely.
instance, but from that very narrow religious viewpoint. And
Well,
that's
no,
not
no,
let
that's
Pavan
not
finish.
and a lot of misinformation gets passed down in that way.
no.
And children at school and religious education can complement subjects such as history and geography and music, and and it can be if it's taught well, it can be a great subject, but then it can also be misused in a way to misinform children. It doesn't teach them critical
Just let
thinking.
George respond to that specifically.
Well, it does.
Briefly.
Not
if you're only teaching them one narrow
hang on.
viewpoint.
Theology, Christian theology has been called the queen of science. There's lots of critical thinking that goes into interpreting this book. Lots of it. People come out with PhDs.
Okay.
And so,
This
so
is
to say there's
this
no
is silly.
critical and the
This is
idea that there's
silly.
no
This is
intelligence
silly.
involved
George,
is really
listen.
just
Okay,
a human
George,
James,
strand.
briefly.
I respect your right to believe whatever you want, and I want you to believe what you
Thank
want.
you.
But you must not inflict your beliefs on people who don't believe the same thing.
And we're
to
not
suddenly
saying that.
say,
We're not
well,
saying
you
that.
are,
No, we're
really.
not. We're
Just
saying
let
have
James make his point
instruction
briefly.
Of what we believe. So you've got a smorgasbord of here's what they believe, here's what they believe.
And here's what
But
we
then
believe.
in
The
a
problem-
faith school,
Yeah,
where
the
people
problem with
decide they want
religion-
to
You've made
send
that
their
point,
children
George. I just
hang
want
on.
James to
Listen,
finish.
George, the problem with religion, it breeds division. Now, I think it is right to respect people's beliefs. Everybody should respect their beliefs. But religions, particularly the main religions who feel that they are right, actually, there is no coming together. You can't come together because you believe you are right and you believe everybody else is wrong. And that's why
Again,
George
James,
says...
Okay,
Right.
I want to bring in a contributor now on webcam, who's the Venerable Soltrim Tenzin Chosang, who's a Buddhist nun who consults with the National Association of Standing Advisory Councils on Religious Education. You've heard this discussion about whether individual faith schools, which are Christian, can and should be teaching Christian values and a point of view. What's your feeling about how we should be having religious education in schools?
Well, within schools, we do have the opportunity to work within something called the SMSC, which is a spiritual, moral, social and cultural diversity framework. So although RE is actually taught as a standalone subject so that we can understand each of the different religions, they're also used as an opportunity to understand the cultural diversity of the children that are within the schools and to challenge the stereotypical and bigoted views that can abide in an area.
Are you worried at all that faith schools are doing whatever they like and non-faith schools are the ones that are actually teaching, you know, all religions and with a kind of equality?
Well, although there's good and bad schools all over, and especially with the new academies coming in, that's bringing in another side of it. But all schools have to teach religion as it's the law of the land, whether they're an academy or whether they're a faith school or whether they're a mainstream school. And even, you know, a Muslim school, they would actually call me in as a Buddhist to give an alternative viewpoint. Some of them are better than others in that respect. We have a lot of multi-faith going on within the children's arena, and especially within Sacres, we go and visit the schools as the Sacre and interact with the RE teachers.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us on the phone there. I want to bring in one other contributor who's Alistair McBay from the National Secular Society in Scotland. Now, you have been working in schools and you have a concern about what's taught. RE lessons and collective worship are kind of two requirements of schools legally. Do you think there's a case for keeping one, the education, and not the worship?
Yes, exactly. The point's been well made about religious education and the fact that it's essential. What we have to do is keep it out of the hands of vested interests, because when that happens, pupils immediately become targets for conversion. And as James has said, matters of faith simply become matters of fact.
Can you tell me how you've seen that?
We keep religious education, but we keep out of collective worship.
Sure. When you say you're concerned about vested interests coming into schools, could you explain briefly what concerns you, what's been happening?
Well, the situation in Scotland, and in fact in England as well, is that a lot of what's classed as collective worship or religious observance is being outsourced to external evangelical groups with some fairly dubious positions on issues like evolution, women's rights, gay, lesbian rights, and what have you. There is a group called Christians in Sport who are very active in schools, and children are told to come dressed for sport and bring a Bible. Why does sport have to involve religious observance? There's another group in schools called Prayer Spaces in Schools, which is claiming on its website that children have been cured of particular diseases as a result of prayers said in prayer spaces in schools. So the situation is completely out of hand, and all this is classed as collective worship or religious observance.
Alistair, thank you so much for sharing that with us. George, there is real concern about how some groups are potentially misleading or abusing their access.
My greatest concern is that, as was rightly pointed out, it's the law of the land that we have acts of worship.
Sure.
Deal
with this issue, because we've moved on from that. Deal with the issue about potential abusive use of access to those lessons and worship.
CCTV, there's always potential. And Alistair's group will always take worst case scenarios, which I'm not even saying that I'm not even saying that sports Christian sports is
just
a worst
in brief,
case.
George, just answer the question, is there a concern? Do you believe there is some abuse going on?
I have a concern that there's not enough observance of the law for worship in schools, which has been the law for decades.
Okay.
Do you think Adam and Eve should be taught as a fact in school? Do you believe Adam and Eve started creation?
I believe in Adam and Eve. I believe in the Bible.
Let me
finish. Let me finish.
And you think that should be taught in school?
Let me finish, because we're jumping
okay, very briefly, George, because I want to bring in viewers' comments.
But we're jumping from worship to education, and I think we all agreed more or less about education, and I think it should be taught. The Christian view on Adam and Eve should be taught. Jesus believed in Adam and Eve, and I believe
about this as a fact. I don't want to get into the theology now, because we're not going to resolve it. I can tell you in the time we have left. Let me bring in some comments from viewers. Milesh from London says religious education is about instilling good values in children. That might be one we'll follow up. Judith says, I'm a committed Christian, but still think religion, as opposed to ethics, should be kept out of school. Marjorie says religion should be taught in school. It gives children the choice about whether or not to believe in God and teaches them about right and wrong. Pavan, all three actually picked up a really interesting issue, which is teaching values and ethics rather than religious belief.
Well, it's because values and ethics are not exclusive to religions. And so, of course, this is why, because if you have a good quality religious education, you know, in there you have encompassed lots of like ethical values and morals and different worldviews. So at the moment, I mean, as the nun was saying, you know, she's obviously demonstrated some good practice from where she's actually located, but the teaching at the moment is very patchy because there isn't a national curriculum yet, and so sometimes there are risks of, you know, things being taught as fact which shouldn't be taught as fact to young people. They should be allowed to make up their own minds. You should present them with lots of different points of view.
But there are facts that are facts of the Christian faith. It's a fact
That's
that
a belief. But give me the example of a non-Christian example.
Yeah.
I remember being told about a school where a Muslim group came in and they had a box of this is how Muslim people dress, bringing out a hijab. Now, a lot of Muslim people don't believe women have to wear a hijab, but it was being presented to a whole school of mixed children from different backgrounds as this is the only way. Is that not a concern to you?
Well, to say this is the only way is a concern, and if I were
and
teaching...
in the same way,
if I
a
were
Christian
teaching,
belief might provoke the same reaction.
Let's separate the education, where I'm quite happy to say Catholics will worship in this way, evangelicals in this way, Presbyterians in that, and it's educating. You might bump into a Presbyterian and they believe this. You might, that's education. But then worship. I believe, one, because this country is constitutionally a Christian country.
It's a secular country,
It's
George,
constitutionally,
It's a
let's talk
secular
facts.
country.
No, okay, I want James to have the last word on this because you've made your point, George.
It is a
Are you
secular
convinced
country.
at all by his distinction about worship and the
He's
Christian
confused. Look,
basis?
everybody is entitled to a faith. We all have beliefs, and that is the way it should be. And people should be treated with respect. It doesn't happen between religions around the world, as you can see. We should teach about religions in school, but worship that's where you go to wherever you are, where you go to a church or a mosque or a synagogue or whatever. That's where you can do your praying and your religion.
And I think the way to end it is, of course, in America. While there are many religious people, of course, schools are secular spaces, and France and many other countries too. Thank you all very much. It was a very lively debate. I enjoyed it. We have to end it there because your text poll votes are in.